dear community. Welcome to our podcast, Deep Transformation, Self-Deciding Spirit. And my name is John Dupuy, and this is Roger Walsh, my esteemed colleague and friend. And today we have with us Hameed Ali, also known as by nom de plume A.H. Almaas. Hameed is a extraordinary integral spiritual thinker and teacher. And his works are, it's what we're working through now. It's a book called The Inner Journey Home. We recommend you get it and work on it. And he is considered by many to be one of the greatest sages of our time and all times. And his influence among spiritual teachers and seekers has been extraordinary. So this is our 8th conversation, and it is a great honor and blessing to be here with Hameed. And we are trying to follow this book more or less, but we also follow the logos wherever it takes us. So we're very grateful to be here with you. Take notes, stop, rewind, listen to this multiple times because there's a lot here. Thank you. Welcome, Hameed.
Well, good to be back here in the new year, supposedly new. I don't know what the new year means, but it is 2025.
Well, let me open with a very interesting part that we're talking about, chapter 15, the inner journey. And in the beginning, well, last week I asked you the question whether it was possible for somebody to be enlightened, awakened, realize, and still behave in a very narcissistic, awful manner and abuse and mistreat people, because we see that a lot in the spiritual world. And Hameed asked me, well, what do you think, John? And I said, I don't think so. And then he explained that there's 2 parts of this. There's the realization of essence of presence. You get it, that there's something exquisitely beautiful and divine inside of you. And then there's the actualization of that realization, where you have to work through the ego and your fixations and your knots and all this stuff so that the soul or the essence can actually come through you as an individual and manifest itself into the world and others. So in the beginning of this chapter, and we may talk about this the whole time, it's very profound. He talks about, it's part of the journey. There's 3 parts. The first part is the journey to presence, the journey with presence, and the journey in presence. So with that, Hameed, could you follow up and let us know your thoughts on that?
That's conceptualization that I used to teach 25 years ago or something. And because of emphasizing the experience of presence as our spiritual nature as presence, not all ways of spiritual nature is presence, can be experienced other ways, but my way of working with it is as presence, because I'm interested in being in the world. You have to be present in it, in the world, embodied in a living and ordinary life. So presence is very important for that methodology. It's called the way of the belly, because it has a substantiality and a fullness and a realness to it that it's not like light or emptiness. So the experience of presence is the defining experience of this path, but it is relation to presence can happen in different ways, because at the beginning we are not the present. We are an individual, an ordinary individual with our own personality and sense of self and ego, all of that, and we are practicing whatever we're practicing, meditation or prayer or inquiry, as we do in this path. And that as long as we have not recognized presence, we haven't recognized that true nature, spiritual nature, as a presence, as the beingness of spirit, we are still on the first journey, which is the journey to presence. In that sense, we're practicing, which is what happens in all paths. You practice before you have experience of illumination. And then the journey with presence, that's the second journey, the second part of the journey in relation to presence, is we experience presence. We might experience it repeatedly or continuously, but we are still not squarely in presence, not squarely the presence. Presence is a companion, an integral, important companion, and that is where actually most spiritual seekers are when they are successful.
Yeah, on a good day, I might add. Yeah.
On a good days, there is individual and there is the presence, and the individual experiences the presence. The third journey, third part, which is we have integrated the sense of presence to have absorbed our sense of self or individuality. So we are within presence, or sometimes appears as presence. That is the experience what I call realization. So that's a way of just viewing how the journey happens for most people. Some people, of course, they have experiences of presence or true nature right from the beginning, and that gets them into practicing, and then might take them a while to start to be able to experience it again. For some people, they just have the longing, the yearning, the motive for a greater truth or reality or God or divinity, and they engage in the spiritual journey, and that is the beginning of it. So these are three stages, and in fact, since then I added a fourth journey. That is not mentioned in that book, which is further after being the present, journeying in present. The language of journey doesn't work anymore. So I call the fourth journey I call it non-journeying.
I'm torn. I'm absolutely fascinated and want to know more, and I'm also wanting to take us through the stages. So maybe if you promise before we
Yes,
finish
we'll
talk
talk about all of them. Yeah, and there are many parts in that chapter besides this general outline.
Yeah,
of the path.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, as I understand it, there's often the basic realization of presence, of essence. You have a soul, true nature that is something that's beyond mind, beyond history, and it's really paradigm rattling and earth shaking when you have that realization, and then you begin to work with it. And that you said in the second part is where we do a lot of our work on our fixations and our egos, and we begin to have this presence or essence come through us as gifts, guidance, our facilities, capabilities, and we begin to have a working, living relationship with this deepest part of ourselves. And at this point, we see it as the deepest part, like not quite ourselves, but something that's deep inside of us. And then eventually, that comes together as bridge, and there's this non-dual. I am that. I am essence. I am presence. I am true nature.
Exactly. That's a good way of saying it.
Do you have a follow-up for that, Roger?
Well, I'd love to. I assume we want to work our way through and have you, Hameed, expand on each of these stages. And as I recall in your chapter, you lay out the first stage as a recognition of presence. But then the second stage seems like it's a more richer and more multi-dimensional process. And I think you talk about second stage the journey with presence begins with the recognition of presence, but then has two distinct processes. One, a development of kind of an individuation, but second, a recognition of true nature. So there's a lot in that, in what you've summarized there. So maybe you could expand on that.
Yeah, so we discussed before how our individual consciousness, what we call soul, is structured through our life early experience into a sense of self, which is an ego with identity and preferences and history and all that. And that is still the soul, no? And there's no, it can't be but the soul, because it has to be a conscious subject, consciousness with a subjectivity, an inner field of experience and capacity to perceive and process information. So that is the soul. But we don't usually at the beginning know it is the soul. We think we just this individual, the cells of self, and our subjectivity is just different elements arising within our body, like sensation and emotion and thoughts and imaging. And however, at some point, as we're exploring and as we are practicing, the practice is to be freer and freer from the constructs, from the conditioning of previous experience. So the soul becomes more naked, more thinned out, and that make it possible for presence to arise, to emerge within it. Because if we adhere to the conditioned part of the soul, we tend to block, to obstruct the natural arising of our nature, our spiritual nature. So that is not obstructed, it begins to arise, and we recognize presence, recognize, oh, something pure, perfect, purely good, and satisfying. And I mean, it is, presence is an amazing kind of thing to recognize what presence is. It's like recognizing the very beingness of consciousness. And it's truth, it's facticity. And it is, we discussed it in terms of qualities of presence. Presence has qualities. That's why the first journey to, the second journey, I think, with presence, when presence begins to arise, begins to ask the quality, and that is what I call in our teaching the theory of wholes, which is each quality, when it is not present, when we're exploring the various constructs of self-images or belief system, we come into some kind of a disjunction from a certain quality. That disjunction, we experience it as an emptiness, as a deficient, as an emptiness that is lacking. I call that a hole, and it can be experienced actually literally as a hole, as some part of your body, as an empty hole, which is of course not physical, but and if we work with that, stay with it, that open to spaciousness within which arises presence in one quality or another, as peacefulness or as clarity or as love or as power, and so that is the journey with presence then. So depending on the individual and their history and their endowments, natural endowments, the first journey can be short or long. For some, it takes them a long time to experience presence. And even when they experience it, they're not very much well on the second journey, because the presence arises infrequently. For some, it begins to flower, and it happens, begin to open up one thing after another, process of an accelerated kind of transformation of consciousness, but the consciousness of the soul, which has been dimmed and defined by previous experience, conditioned in a particular pattern, begin to become freer, and we begin to learn about our spiritual nature. And basically, when we learn about presence, not just presence and that says I am, presence, I am, experience of I am, called I am. It's not just one thing. It is, when you learn about presence, it is something that constantly revealing its potentialities, because it is a spiritual nature, which is a whole realm of universe of experience of presence of many kinds, of many dimensions, of many possibilities, many colors, many flavors, and there's heart qualities, mind qualities, and it's quite a learning, because it's interesting also, uh, the fun part of the journey, because you're learning new thing, and each thing is like you never seen it before. You never encountering something completely new. I never seen it. I didn't even anticipate it. I didn't know things like that existed, and it's sort of miraculous experience of presence, because when you're experiencing the quality, for instance, of peace, stillness and peace, you know it is peace, not because you remember it from before. The peacefulness and the recognition of peace are the same thing. The knowing is part of the presence.
Yeah.
So the beingness of presence and the knowingness of presence are indistinguishable, inseparable. So when we encounter presence, presence has a self-knowing that doesn't come from the mind, not from above, not from the past. It's inherent. I call it basic knowledge. I mean, knowledge of immediacy. And that's, of course, historically called gnosis or noesis in Greek, which just mean immediate, direct knowing by being. And that is how we know presence. Knowing it as a presence, that it is presence, is also a knowing. And knowing of presence. You're not just don't know, I'm not just knowing light, I'm not just knowing freedom, I'm not just knowing space, I'm knowing presence. So the sense of I amness, the amness of the I, of the is a knowing, and then the knowing expand into the qualities of this presence, of the I amness, which is I am peace, I am truth, I am power, I am love, I am fulfillment, I am impeccability, all these things. That is the second journey, the journey with presence. And still, I mean, that can happen without the ego completely being absorbed.
Yeah.
You see, and that is, we need to allow for that possibility, because many teachings talk about it as you either have an ego or you don't have an ego. To experience true nature means no ego. Some teaching talk like that, which makes it sort of impossible for most people. And it's also not true for the experience of most people. Most people they have all kinds of spiritual experiences, but they still exist as an ordinary individual with an ego identity. You see, so it's really realistic. I mean, I'm not saying anything unusual here. That is how most people experience spirituality, and that is a rich part of the inner journey is learning about our true nature, about spiritual nature, and the treasure it is, the preciousness and the beauty and the mystery and the surprises and I remember the time when I was experiencing it. Of course, I didn't know when something was going to happen or another. It just happens, appears one time or another, and dawns in me, descends in me, appears in me, all kind of these things. And I'm all pleasantly surprised, sometimes, amazed by the magnificence and the beauty and I mean, the unexpectedness that there is such a thing. Most people, even when people engage in spiritual journey, they think they're going to be unified with God. They don't know what that is. They think they're going to be no ego. They have no idea what that means. I mean, we don't know that it is a whole realm of splendor, beauty, and also freedom and liberation. And, you know, we begin to see what is really truly potential for a human being, and the deep potential of a human being that is amazing, and that when we experience it, we wish all human beings have access to that because it will make people happier and better human beings too. Will be kinder, loving, more open, tolerant, all of that. And because these are the qualities that become our values, they transform our values to new inherent values of our spirit. These become the values that govern our life. And in the process of actualization, it begins in the third turning, third journey. The third journey is when we are learn to experience present to the extent that it's not only frequent or continuous companion, but we are within it. We are it. We are part of it. We are swimming in the ocean of presence, or we are either swimming in the ocean of presence, or we are the presence itself.
We are the
We are it. And that's what I call self-realization, because it becomes ourself. The self is the presence then, instead of the usual sense of self. And that is also the journey continues. There's a lot of discoveries because the presence continues to transform, to reveal, not transform, reveal its possibility. Reveal is, because presence in some sense is immutable. Each quality is what it is. It doesn't change. Love is always love. It doesn't become less love, or it is always love. And always pure love, and quality. But same thing with peace and the quality, for instance, of truth I mentioned, or the quality I call impeccability. You experience yourself as if you're made out of stainless steel, fluid stainless steel, and sense of inherent impeccability, which is very important for actualization, for living our life. We have to be impeccable, because impeccable means we are learning, we behave, we live as an expression, faithful to the truth of our true nature, our spiritual nature, the presence that we recognize at this point in third journey as what we are. Yeah, so this is our identity, our self, it's our nature, our beingness. And that, as we learn that, then the question of actualization becomes important. How do we live it? Are we just that? Do we have the experience of being that, or does it come through our action and behavior? And that's what the actualization we discussed in a previous session.
And this, the more that the ego self, which is not the enemy, it just seems like a necessary structure for all this,
Yes.
begins to clarify and purify, then we have more like insights into the nature of things that spontaneously arise. And there's more often a feeling of guidance that, this is what I'm supposed to be doing and, in the moment. And it just kind of arises as wisdom and knowing and insight. Would that be a true statement?
Yeah, I mean, guidance turned out to be is one of the qualities. One of the forms that presence appears as guidance, as inner guidance. And the inner guidance, it doesn't mean you should marry this person, not that one. That's not what guidance mean. It means, am I on the right direction or not? It's like a compass.
Yeah.
Yes, you are in the right direction.
That's
That's what guidance is, because the guiding you're in your minute, second to second experience, minute to minute experience. You know.
I mean, there's so much in what you said, and I'd love to see if I can distill some of it out.
Yes. Mhm.
First, you talked about the many qualities or aspects, to use your term, of presence, being, and that feels so important, because I know for myself, I had somehow imbibed a kind of static view of being and realization. And as things emerged and changed, it was kind of surprising. And am I missing something? So that idea you give of presence as constantly unfolding new insights and new aspects and dimensions and potentials of itself feels really important. Uh, you also talked about learning about true nature as being this ongoing surprise and a delightful surprise, never knowing what's coming.
Yes.
And you made a very important point about thinking of spiritual maturation along a spectrum rather than a dichotomy. That feels really important, because, as you implied, so often there's the idea of, yeah, you're either identified with the ego or you've transcended it. And likewise with that abysmal concept of enlightenment, you're either enlightened or you're not, as opposed to a much more useful concept to say spiritual maturity, which allows for a whole spectrum of possibilities and an endless possibility of growth. And then you spoke very beautifully about the way in which these realizations and the appreciation of the beauty and boundless gifts of presence and true nature lead one to what the Buddhists would call, I guess, the bodhisattva aspiration, the deep desire that all beings could experience this. And uh, and then you just emphasized again the endless possibilities and the continual endless unfolding of possibilities that can occur on the path. So
I think I appreciate the way you're sort of spelling it out, but the point that you mentioned in the beginning, which is you had a static view of what presence of being is, that comes from many teachings and teachers who talk about enlightenment or awakening as this unusual explosion or experience that changes everything. And there's no discussion usually. Well, what is the nature of that? Does that? And does it stay the same or does it change? People don't talk about those things, and even when they talk about it, they just go in detail about what is that state. Like if you study Dzogchen, for instance, or Advaita Vedanta, they go in great detail describing the state that they call realization, enlightenment. But there isn't much discussion about transformation or change or evolution in that state. So that doesn't mean they don't know it. It is just not part of the canons of most teachings. I make it important that people know that spiritual development or illumination is not just realization, not just experience. There's experience of, there's realization of, there's being of, there's actualization of, and even that, there are many kinds. And I only scratch the surface in terms of the possibilities and the quality that it can be.
Mm. Well, though that scratching fills 500 pages for me.
Yeah, it is really, because I haven't talked about the difference between uh, the presence can be an individual presence in the sense you feel a presence within your soul, within your consciousness, or holding you, or experiencing it as a vast expanse that is the nature of everything, of all of reality.
Mhm.
And even that, the vast expanse, that is how the non-dual teaching talk about presence or consciousness. But they talk about it as one thing. I talk about there are many dimensions of that. Can be awareness, can be love, can be presence, emptiness, dynamism, and that also surprises. I was surprised myself. Each time I got to, okay, got it. Okay, that's what they're talking about. I was happy with it for a year or two, and suddenly changed to something else. I said, "Oh, wow, what happened? Did I lose it?" Turned out, no, I lost it, but I learned something new, and transition to another way that spiritual nature can be. And then there are further reaches beyond the boundless, beyond the infinite.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing in your transmission or your teaching, Hameed, is this idea that of actualization and the responsibility we have to keep working on ourselves and you know metabolizing or getting things out that would keep us from deeper insight, from deeper service, deeper uh, being a source of this goodness, of this presence in the world, and not just it's one thing and then everything is fixed, and that seems to be very dangerous and has caused a lot of problems for a lot
There's
of.
no such thing, everything is fixed.
That makes me feel good.
No, the world doesn't get fixed. That's one thing. And fixing one's life, and life it always has its challenges, you know. You have to deal with them anyway because it's not coming from you. Challenges come from life itself, a lot of them. And if we have patterns from our history that we haven't worked out, they will become, they can trip us. They can disconnect us from presence or could limit our access to it. Or
Mm. And Hamid, in the second part of the journey uh, with self, you talk about two major processes. We've been focusing largely on the one uh, of realizing union with true nature. And perhaps you'd like to say more about that, but that you also bring in something which isn't so commonly spoken of in spiritual traditions, the kind of individuation process that also accompanies that.
yeah, so that brings us back to the individual consciousness, the soul. It recognizes its nature, which is the experience and the realization of spiritual presence. And then that impacts the conscious, the soul, for it to mature and develop. Essence doesn't mature. Essence just reveals more of its possibilities because it's infinite possibility. The soul is a growing organism of consciousness that matures and develops, and part of this maturation is an individuation of soul recognizing itself as a person. A person made out of presence. You see, most people think they are a person, you see, but that person of the ego is an imitation, is a reflection, really,
Mm.
of the essential person. And there is such a thing as a person of ego because there is an essential person. Otherwise, where did people learn about being a person? where did the idea of person come from? You can just be an entity. Why a person? Right? People don't think of that. Say, oh, I am a person. Well, yes, but will you call a monkey a person? Will you call a donkey a person? They are a being, but they're not a person. A human being can't be a person. Where does that come from? Where did we learn about person? When we recognize the person of presence, which is the true individuation of the soul, you know, that the soul become a person of presence. A person meaning a human being uh, made out of presence, with
And
a
you call that,
personal quality, being able to relate in a personal way, to make contact with other persons, you know. But the interesting thing is, how do you relate as a person without telling your personal story? Most people are, when it's said to be personal, mean talk about myself, talk about my history, a story, something I did, what I like, I don't like. Here, being a personal has nothing to do with that. It's the quality of contact. It's purely personal because it is the personalness turned out to be a quality of presence. It's inherent, irreducible Platonic form.
and you call that the pearl of great price,
Yes.
this individuated self that is part of this journey. And I think that's a beautiful image. And um, yeah, the pearl of great price.
Yes, and that term comes from the Gnostics, from the Sufis. They've known about this. They maybe didn't emphasize it, didn't make a teaching, a whole teaching. They knew, and there are stories about the pearl purpose, about how a traveler who comes from another exotic land come to the world looking for this uh, pearl beyond price that is that is protected by a fearsome monster. And they have to sort of deal with the fearsome monster to be able to get to the pearl beyond price. And that fearsome monster, of course, is the ego, and its tendencies. And but the thing about this, which is I mentioned the Gnostics and the Sufis, some spiritual teaching know about the pearl beyond price, known even in Taoism, actually. They talk about the pearl and the divine embryo that develops to become the person.
Jesus talked about that also in the Gospels. He talks.
Yeah, yes, Jesus, yeah, Christianity has that. The the thing about it is that, but the story is always that you look for this pearl not in heaven, but in the world of people. You see, it is not, you don't find it by going to heaven into the spiritual. It's by wrestling with life, by dealing with life, because it is individuation. It is to be a person who knows how to live in the world. So it is found in the world because it is by applying oneself in the world with presence, with the quality of presence, wisdom, that the soul matures to become that pearl. So it is also an incomparable pearl because there is incomparable. There's nothing like it. It's like it is a functional part. It's a functional presence, which doesn't make sense. Presence is just isness, but this one gives the soul the capacity to function as as personally, individually, and to relate as a human being, as a person, human person in the world, doing things and interacting with people and living life. And because of that, it is, you see, if you are just peace or consciousness, you can't function in the world. That one, these are not non-functional. They just is.
Mm.
Pearl bring in a functional capacity to the isness. And that's why it is incomparable price.
Mm.
It's precious and incomparable, you know.
Hameed, I at one stage I was having trouble understanding the pearl beyond price, so so I asked ChatGTP to summarize
Yeah,
what you had said in all your literature about the pearl beyond price, and to compare it to ideas in psychological traditions. And it did a pretty good job. It said that Hameed identifies 4 key aspects of the pearl beyond price. First, uniqueness and authenticity, that the pearl signifies the realized, individuated self, distinct from others, yet deeply connected to universal essence. It has the pearl beyond price has a sense of inner value or intrinsic worth that transcends any material valuation. Third, it is produced by transformation through suffering, emphasizing wrestling with life, as you said.
right.
And fourth, it said it's an integration of essence and personality. Rather than rejecting the ego, it's a transformation, transforming and integrating it with one's deeper essence. How would you grade ChatGTP on that?
Very good. I thought, yeah, caught many important elements of it.
Very, very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I usually think of another way of saying it. I mean that brought out some important thing from many places. In my book, The Pearl Beyond Price, I mentioned that the basic element is beingness, personalness, contact, you know, and functionality.
Mhm.
These are what distinguishes it from other qualities,
Mm.
you see. Beingness, of course, true with all other qualities, but the personalness, the contactfulness, the functionality, that's unique to it. You see, in the first journey, we can learn about the personal essence, but we could also learn about the point of light. You probably come across the point of light or the point of existence, which I wrote a whole book about. And you see, in the individuality of ego and the sense of being an ego, the soul is an ego, is a sense of being a person with a sense of self-recognition, an identity that is me. Those are replaced in the essential level by the pearl and the point. The point is the sense of a pure identity. It is the sense of I, pure I-ness. It's actually the affect of I-ness. I is not a word, it's not a concept, it's an actual state.
Yeah.
And that brings in what I call possibility of self-realization. To recognize I am that. You have to have what is I? When you say I am that, I is not the ego. But there is an I.
Mhm.
But that I is usually in the teaching and approach is a point of light, presence, and existence. Nisargadatta Maharaj talks about that actually. If you read his books, and I mentioned that in my lecture, Nisargadatta, where he talks about the I am, and he goes and every once in a while says, what is the I am? He said it is a point of existence. And people think I am, he means the absolute. No, he doesn't mean the absolute. The absolute is later. First, you have to be the I am. For him, the I am is a point of existence.
So that's an individual point of light, pearl.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
it's the star of Bethlehem.
Mm.
wow.
That's very helpful, Hameed, because one of the things, many things I've gained from wrestling with this book is realizing that I've incorporated a number of ideas about spirituality, the path, realization, etc., which are actually mistaken and have hindered my own experience and progress. And you're
which
just,
which is extensive. Your experience is extensive. I know that.
uh,
You're a deep practitioner and you have a lot of experience and wisdom. Yeah.
well, thank you very much. Coming from you, that's very touching. And what you just said made me realize that for a long time I've carried a subtle misunderstanding, uh, which hasn't been dominant, but I think it's affected things. And that is, one thinks of transcending the ego as dissolving the self sense. And you're pointing to the fact that no, there's actually a profound I-ness that is actually an inherent part of our being.
Yeah. It is inherent part of our being, and it is also the prototype of the ego I. Where
Ah,
did the ego learn to say I?
okay, that's helpful.
Goes on the right track when it
Yeah.
recognizes itself as
Yeah, we do have self. I, we call it ego, we call it identity. You know, what is my identity? What is really me? What other? Because there is identity in the essential realm. And usually many teachings talk about I am that. But I am and that are three things. I is the identity. Am is the beingness. That beingness of what? What is the nature of that beingness?
That's a very helpful discernment. Yeah.
yeah, that's big. That's yeah, thank you.
You see, and not all teaching have I am that. The Buddhists don't have I am that. The Buddhists just there is awareness. They don't include the I.
Mhm.
So for them, there's the realization of pure awareness or Dharmakaya. The Hindu talk about I am that. And because it's not like the Buddhists don't know about the point of light, they don't think of it as important as the Hindu do, you see. And the Sufis know it. I remember talking to a Sufi, and I said, what is the self? He said, the point, it's like a star, point of light.
Mm. Mm.
That is that's a radical idea when it comes down to spirituality and individual isness and responsibility. And there you are.
And it is one of the form qualities of presence. But there's the pearl, we talked about it, which is unusual. I wrote a whole book about it, and the point, I wrote a whole book about it. But the point of light is an amazing kind of experience. People talk about the vastness and the consciousness, but the point of light is pure intelligence. Pure intelligence, it is the true witness, witnessing without attachment. It is pure timelessness. It's the isness that feels timeless beyond time. And to be it is like you're completely no mind. And while when you are the point, you don't feel you're a point. When you see it, you see a point. When you feel it, it's just timeless, timelessly here, you see. And it is, you could see it first. People sometimes see it like a flitting star in their mind, you know. That's why I call the Star of Bethlehem, because it is related to the pearl, the birth of the personal essence of the person. The star and the pearl, they are two sides of the same thing. At some point, they become unified as a pearl with a point. I call it the pearly point, you know. And but these are some of the secrets of inner esoteric path, spirituality. Now, teaching refer to it here and there, but nobody's willing to say the whole story, you see.
Mm. Is there a reason for keeping that particular part of the story secret?
You could read about it in some obscure books,
Mm.
but usually, because of the dominant spirituality in the spiritual world these days focuses on just consciousness.
Mhm.
And so the fact of consciousness is just true. All of those are consciousness. All these are pure consciousness, but they are forms of consciousness. They're not just universal general consciousness. And so the focus is on consciousness, and most people are taken by that. And I think as the spiritual field in the West develops, it will begin to recognize those things and highlight them because they're very important for the development of a human being. Because you can be a true person with a true identity, true eyeness, and the eyeness can be the point of light, which is like a brilliant star that is alive, that is throbbing, that is radiating. And but that point of light takes us all the way to the absolute reality. The absolute reality is nothing but the point of light. It is really the absolute, the vastness becomes a point. The point become infinite. They're two sides of the same thing.
I think
Yes.
in our recently in the Western history that the ego became a pejorative. Okay. And when Freud
Yeah.
was talking about the ego, he said das Ich, the I. And it got
Yeah.
translated to ego in English. And that's become, oh, he's just an egomaniac. It's my ego, this and that. It became something bad. So a lot of the point of our practice was to get rid of this false, bad.
Well, yeah, it is true. But the I is a mystery. But however, the I of the ego, because it is not the true I, it is a reflection, it is insecure. And because it is insecure, it becomes selfish. It has to protect itself. And sometimes protect itself at the expense of whatever. That's the origin of selfishness.
Mm.
Why are people selfish? Because they want to survive. They want to survive as a self, you know.
Yeah. And that's a very important point you make in the book and elsewhere, Hamid, that the ego is a self-representation, not big self, and that by its very nature, it is innately associated with sense of deficiency or lack or
Yeah,
flaw. I sometimes call it the fundamental flaw fallacy, that
yeah,
there's
yeah,
some way it's flawed.
yeah. Well, it is because it's an imitation.
Mhm.
It is an imitation of something real. See, the ego is an imitation. It is a reflection. It is like the essential nature is a prototype. Because the ego, as I say, the ego is not original. It cannot be original. It cannot be original and having a sense of personhood, having a sense of identity or self. All of these things, all come takes it borrows them from its essential nature. It's come from essential nature. It can't be original because it is, as you said, it's a construct, a belief system. How can that be original? You know.
Hamid, we could say that the ego could be a cocoon or a seed that can be metabolized in order to become the true point of light?
Yeah, it is. It doesn't become. It's more like recognizing what is it an expression of. What is it as a reflection from? And when we see it as a reflection, we recognize it is based on images and concepts, whatever, and those are not the real thing. And so it does feel inauthentic at some point. It feels we call it fake self. the false self. But if we recognize as the false self, we begin to look for what is the real self. And that takes us then to the real self. And then, so it is the transmutation of the ego is better of dissolving of the beliefs and the ideas and the history, so and absorb into the soul, and there emerges the true quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in your discussion of the second phase of the inner journey, the journey with self, we've been focusing on two major processes you outline here. We've focused on the individuation, the becoming of the pearl with great price. But you also point to a further dimension of the second journey, which is the realization of not just essence in the personal sense, but of our true nature, absolute nature. Maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, so the two lines are the individuation and the realization. The individuation is the soul becomes a person, a person of presence. The realization to realize I am that. I am, and that is not one thing, it changes. I am power, I am compassion, I am love, I am emptiness, I am the absolute, I am Dharmakaya, I am, Brahman, I am Parabrahman, I am Tao, so that is, many of the Hindu talk about that as if it's only one thing. But that, I mean, each one of them describe that differently. If you look at it, so obviously, but the realization is I am that. So, which is different from the individual. And the I am can then manifest in the world, function in the world as a person. I can be a vastness. I can be an infinite black luminous night. But walk in the street as a person. I'm completely formless and infinite, but still walk in the street as a person. And as the vastness, the interesting thing, one way is of also experiencing that are really magical, is that I am this infinite source of all of reality. And as I am as that, I manifest this street and manifest myself walking in the street.
And that's the point of light that opens up to
To the vastness, to what I call the absolute nature.
Yeah.
Because as the absolute nature, we talk about now true nature of presence and its further development and the further discoveries as what we call the absolute nature, which is the source dimension, what I call it, which is the where there is only the absolute. There's nothing else. And all people are nothing but organs of perception for the absolute. So, as the absolute, for instance, I'm speaking through this body, but I'm speaking through your body. I'm listening through your body. Because there's only one absolute. But there are many points of light. Each one is a point of light.
and that gives us the importance of individuals. Each should be treated as a point of light.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that we learn in our spiritual journey, is that we are both individual and not. We're both are equally true. We are each a true person. We can be a true person of being, but we're also the pure beingness itself, the actual, the mystery itself of being. we are both at the same time. And some tradition emphasize one over the other.
And it seems like you're pointing to such an important way of understanding Hameed, which is a kind of both and. And so many traditions, as you pointed out, focus on one experience or one state or one realization. And I think one of the gifts you're bringing us is, or being is bringing through you, is a both and perspective of the multiplicity and continuous unfolding and never ending possibility of being an experience rather than this is it.
It's not the path for the lazy ones. Some people want to just discover it and sit in their laurels, and that's it. And I thought to myself that way for many years, but then I just, it wasn't my doing. I was taught that this is not like that, that the spiritual nature is the whole universe, as I mentioned many times, a whole universe of experience of possibilities,
But
And
Hamid,
another,
what brought you back into the world from, say, sitting on your laurels and just enjoying that absolute bliss consciousness, however you want to say that? What brought you back to Hameed Ali? And here we are speaking to you.
it emerges. Something happened in the world, and out of the absolute emerges a pearl.
Mhm.
It happens by itself. I don't do it. I mean, when I say I don't do it, who's I? I mean, at some point the I changes.
And there's another facet or gift from what you've been saying, Hameed, of the uh, ever-changing and ever-unfolding nature of true nature, which is, I know for me, I certainly bought into the idea that there was one final state and realization, etc. And given my overachieving personality, I strove mightily for enlightenment, and it was enlightenment or bust, and I busted. But it was very helpful reading your perspective of that every opening can be a portal to further openings, because it dissolved the sense of there's a final goal and I've got to get there, that kind of egoic striving side, and it enabled a more resting in the continuous unfolding, and that's been a real gift.
Yeah, I think you probably saw in this book, like in one of the appendices, I talk about the many ultimates.
Yes.
That each teaching has their ultimate. They're all true and authentic, but they're more than one. So what does that mean? No, the way most teaching take it is that I got the ultimate, the others is not the real ultimate.
Yeah.
But I've experienced enough of them to know they're all real, So that's why what led me to the recognition. Well, each one of them feels like an ultimate, but there is other ones. So obviously, reality is much more magical than that. It's much more, it's richer. And discovery and the surprise of discovery is an important part of the joy of the journey.
Yeah. There aren't many things I'm still sure of, but one of them is this game is a lot bigger than I can imagine.
Well, it's not just a matter of being free from our suffering. That is one important thing, being free. But also, there's a whole universe to discover and things to taste, things to experience, and to travel. And I mean, it is quite an adventure. I mean, so it's not, when I say sitting in your laurels, sounds pretty static, in some sense boring at some point, But to realize that there's surprises every once in a while. Sometimes it comes in a fast succession. Sometimes it might take a year or two for a new surprise to emerge, and that changes the whole shift. Like we haven't talked about the other beyond the infinite boundlessness, but there are all kinds of surprises that are unexpected to reality, and it is good for us to be not to take the view I got it, I know it finally, and that's it. To say yes, I got it, but there's a lot more that I don't know. To always take the view that I still have some ignorance. Ignorance never ends.
It feels a very healthy and helpful perspective to hold, yes.
And also humbling. No, it's like,
Yeah, and it comes with that humility, definitely. Because, I mean, I know many things, experience many things, but I feel I'm sort of could be at the beginning. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, you're reminding me of Isaac Newton at the end of his life, who said something so beautiful that I've memorized it, which was, and Newton was, recognized perhaps the greatest scientist who ever lived, and
Yeah.
said, "I do not know how I may appear to others, but as to myself, I have been as a little boy, playing by the seashore, ever now and then finding a brighter pebble or a prettier shell, while all around me the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered."
Yeah. Yeah. So he had true objective humility.
Yeah, yeah.
can I ask you a question, Hameed? We talk about the practices and the diamond approach and the inquiry, the meditation, but Roger and I have been immersing ourselves into your books that came through you. And foundationally, I come from a Catholic background, and the idea is lectio divina, when you're working with the text, is also a spiritual practice. And obviously, you're a very learned man. You've read a lot. You've talked to a lot of amazing people in your life. But how should we approach the study of this text or any text when it's part of the awakening and the growth and uh, the realization of the soul and essence? Is there a way you could recommend that we work with this?
Well, I mean, the way you're doing it, John, sounds pretty good, which is you don't read a spiritual book, especially written by a master or a teacher, the way you read a novel or a newspaper. You really immerse yourself, study it, and open yourself to the experience that is discussed. Because it is spirituality is not just knowledge of the mind. It is actual flowering of experience, emergence of new possibilities in our experience of ourselves and the world. So when we're studying, that's how I study. I read those books. It takes me a while, just like you're taking your time to read this book. And I study, I sit with it sometime, and once in a while, sometimes I'm not reading, walking around, I get an insight about what I wrote, what I read. Sometimes, if you really read a book, a spiritual book, deeply, and you really immerse in it, you can get into the consciousness of the writer. You
Yes.
can directly contact the consciousness. You can begin to see from their perspective.
Yeah, it's not just intellectual words, but there's a transitory essence that can come through the writings
Yeah,
of the master.
not otherwise it's not a spiritual book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hameed, we've covered the first and second parts of the inner journey, and now come to the third, in which you describe two key concepts. One, or two processes that occur. One is you call the essentialization of the soul, and the other, the realization of the ground of being. So please, could you explain these?
Yeah, that's good. You remind me of those. Essentialization of the soul. Basically, at the beginning, the soul is an ego, is self with history and preferences and emotion, all of that. Essentialization of the soul means the soul begin to recognize that the presence is its true nature. It is its very substance. So in time, the soul becomes an essential soul. Soul and essence are inseparable. The two sides of the same thing. And the soul is just makes essence, which is the true nature, be a living consciousness that learns and develops. And I mean, the socialization of the soul actually is in some tradition, like the Kabbalah and the Sufis, call it the complete human being, which means or some called sometimes referred to as the angelic soul, meaning it's purely essential. The soul doesn't have ego left in it. It is all pervaded and constituted by the essential presence. And that's so it is not only has access to light or to presence, it is the light and the presence, but it retain its dynamism, its transformative capacity, its learning capacity. And so that's the essentialization, what we call the essentialization of the soul. And the other one is about the boundless being, is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, realization of the ground of being,
The
true nature.
ground of being, yeah. Yeah, which is recognizing that the presence expands and expands and reveals itself until we recognize it is not just the nature of the soul, it is the nature of all souls, the nature of everything, nature of the ocean, the nature of the earth, nature of the rocks, nature of everything. So that is the non-dual experience. That's what's called non-dual, like it is the ground, meaning we experience ourselves as the ground. That's the realization of it. I am the ground of reality. And reality emerges within me, or the whole universe emerges within me. But that doesn't mean just within me as the way most people see it. No, it is made out of light and presence. So that is the taking us to, I mean, the book will get into detail into that, into what I call the boundless and non-dual dimensions of presence. And that is when we recognize that presence is the ground of all of reality. Meaning it is the source, it is the bottom, it is the nature of everything, and as one homogeneous thing, one expanse, one medium that is like one of the ways of experiencing the expanse is as pure love. That's when the people say love is everywhere, love is everything, everything is love, God is love. That is recognizing love as the ground.
Mm.
Yeah, I mentioned that in one of our first conversations when I was a little boy. I think I must have been 11 or 12. I had that realization that God was everywhere and God was love. And
Yeah.
it changed my life. It's haunted me my whole life. It's just changed the course of everything. And I didn't know where to go or who to ask. There was no Hameed around. And
Yeah,
didn't feel like anybody in the Catholic Church that I knew anything about that. And it just, it just haunted me. I mean, God haunted me because of that just initial experience of that presence, everything and its love. It's just so overwhelmingly beautiful.
yeah, beautiful and satisfying, and blissful, and
You have hope and
yeah,
fear goes away and it's
yeah.
actually all okay, that sort of thing.
Why? That's why there is hope. If it wasn't for that, there's no hope for humanity.
Mm.
Wow. Yeah.
And I mean, it seems like you spoke of the the process in this third stage of true nature revealing itself not only as the ground of the soul and essence, but of all reality. And it seems like that's a big jump. At least maybe I'm just conflating this with my own experience, but for me anyway, over years of practice, the realization of presence as the ground of personal of being
Yeah.
has, that's a pretty relatively constant experience, but it still feels like a big jump to recognize.
Yeah, the ground of all of my experience. And then that's one way of experiencing the ground of all of my experience. But also, usually, most non-dual teaching, when they talk about the ground, they mean the ground of all of reality,
Mhm.
of all of existence, of all of manifestation. That's usually the technical word for it is ground.
And that feels like a significantly more demanding realization. I think you draw the distinction between first and second turnings in your own work there.
Yes, that's the second turning realization. When we experience, when the spiritual experience is not located or individual, but it is vast, it has no end, no boundaries. It's most basically recognizing that when you experience presence, it's a continuum of self-knowing, self-conscious truth that has no end, it has no edges. It says has no shape, has no edges, it doesn't end anywhere. In that sense, it is infinite ground. And when we experience it that way, you realize part of that experience, the experience that everything is within it. Everything is within it. Everything is made out of it at some point.
That
And
the soul, in a sense, is holographic. It's an individual soul, yet it contains everything at the same time, and using a hologram to kind of conceptualize that.
I think the holographic thing is another kind of realization we'll talk about at some point. That is a very interesting thing. It's actually more advanced than what we're talking about.
Mhm.
What we're talking about is simpler, which is what many of the non-dual teaching talk about, which is consciousness is everything,
Mhm.
or love is everything, or presence is everything. Or as the Buddha will say, pure, empty awareness is the ground of all things. They call it the mother clear light. Remember about the sun clear light and the mother clear light? The mother clear light means it is the mother of all,
Mhm.
you see.
And I mean, you not only lay out these three major stages and the processes involved in the inner journey home, you also point out that this inner journey naturally brings up certain barriers and issues that need to be worked through, and you emphasize that the diamond approach lays particular emphasis on four of these. One are psychodynamic issues, the kind of workings of the psyche, the defenses, etc. Second are structural issues, the very nature of the organization of the self sense. Then existential issues, which are part of human existence. And finally,
Right.
what you call epistemological or phenomenological issues, the ways of knowing. So perhaps you could give an overview of those.
In the last 2 minutes.
Right, yeah. And we can continue with them.
I call them issues, and that's the thing that most people wish don't exist. They wish they just experience the presence and be done. There's no more thing. But the mind and our ego and our individuality is an amalgam of many years of conditioning and impression and learning and beliefs and it's a long process to really be liberated from that, for all of that to sort of not just be not affecting us, but for it to dissolve, to go away. So that will be completely pure, free of all of that. And that, of course, go through many, many kinds of structures. The individual of ego has in it beliefs, has in it self-images, have in it what I call structure. They have primitive structure, preconceptual structure, prenatal structures. Because the ego structuration begins in the womb, and somewhat in a rudimentary way. But earlier on, before we can think and know, we have experience conditions, structures, which is part of learning, part of how we learn to survive. But that begins, whether it's positive or negative, the structure, depending on our experience, it is a structure, it's an imprint that the soul need to be free from, you see. And psychodynamic means because that affects our present experience. The past, present affect our present experience. And for existential issues, is a question of life and death, illness, and all of these things. It all happen, like dealing with death is an important thing. When you recognize yourself as essential presence, you realize you don't die. Presence doesn't make sense for it to die, because it is neither life nor death. It's something apart from that. And so the overcoming of the fear of death doesn't happen by just feeling the fear and getting through it. That's part of it. But part of it, recognize that I am something that doesn't make sense for it to die. I'm not going to die. It's not like, my body is going to die. My body is going to drop off. But what I am and the present I am, I might not know exactly how I'll be, how the experience will be, but it will naturally going to continue, because it's beyond, not only beyond life and death, beyond time.
I think that's an amazing place to kind of wrap that up. Leaving us with that, Jewel, is extraordinary. And I want to thank everybody who's been on this journey with us. We've gotten a lot of really positive support and comments from folks. And get the book and the appendices, by the way. It's a jewel cabinet.
Yeah.
Make sure you read those also.
Yeah, and another book I wanted to suggest that touches on many of the things we're talking about is a small booklet, a biographical one, the Luminous Night Journey. You might have read it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It gives me my experience of some of these things we're talking about today.
Beautiful.
And how a
Thank-
motorcycle changed your life.
Yeah.
Very,
Well, good talking with you guys, in the 2025. You take
Thanks,
care.
Hameed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Here I am, John Dupuy again, and I'm here to talk about supporting the Deep Transformation Podcast. The podcast has been an amazing experience for Roger and myself and for our team, and it's been growing. We're currently in the top 2% of worldwide podcasts, which is really remarkable. We think it's very important. We think deep transformation is the only way to go, because if we don't, we're in serious trouble. We're so grateful for the amazing presences and spirits and soul and people who've been on our podcasts. We'd also like to ask you again for your support, financial support, and thank you for all of you who have been supporting this. And up till now, it's all been out of pocket for Roger and myself, and it takes money to produce, pay our staff, and for marketing. The circle keeps on growing, but the quicker that could happen, the more positive effect we could have in the world. And that's what we're here to do. And I was thinking before this, upstairs in my meditation room, I have the famous 10 Zen ox herding pictures up there. And the final one, after you guys go through all this journey, is going back into the marketplace with open hands and open heart. So that's what we're trying. Open hands, open heart, open mind, so that we can do what? we can transform effectively and deeply and listen to some of the greatest minds on our planet as to how to do that. So thank you for your support. We love you and you matter. God bless.